It started with the phone calls. Late night, past midnight, the kind that could be dismissed as work emergencies, at least at first. My wife, Emily, had always been driven. She was 32, ambitious, and smart. Her business was everything to her, so it wasn't unusual for her to get caught up in last-minute meetings or client issues. We'd been married for 8 years, and in that time, I'd gotten used to her long hours. I didn't think much of it. But a couple of months ago, something changed. The phone calls became more frequent, and she would take them in another room. The conversations were quiet, whispered even, and they lasted longer. Too long. She'd come back to bed and kiss me goodnight like nothing was wrong, but I could feel it in my gut. Something wasn't right. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. Emily had been working closely with her business partner, Jason, for the last few years. He was an investment guy, slick, well-dressed, all smiles at parties. I'd met him a few times, and while I wasn't his biggest fan, I trusted Emily. She was sharp and professional, never the type to let emotions mix with business. But it wasn't just the phone calls. There were business trips too, one she hadn't mentioned until the last minute. Just a quick meeting, she'd say, brushing me off. I'll be back by tomorrow. I never questioned her, though, because what reason did I have to? We'd built a life together, a home, and I thought we were happy. Then one night, I noticed something that I couldn't ignore. Emily had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she went to take a shower. I don't know what made me do it, but I sat down, staring at her screen. Her email was open, and a message caught my eye, subject line, private account. I don't know what I was expecting, but what I found hit me like a punch to the gut. The email was from her bank, confirming a recent transfer of $15,000 to an account I'd never heard of. We share all our finances, everything. I handle most of the bills, and we'd always been transparent about money. So why was she sending money to a secret account? My heart started racing. I quickly scrolled through her recent emails, and there it was, more transfers, all to the same account. I had no idea what this meant, but I knew it couldn't be good. I felt sick, like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to be pushed over. What the hell was going on? Before I could dig any deeper, I heard the water shut off upstairs. I slammed the laptop shut and leaned against the counter, trying to act normal. But everything was far from normal. As Emily came down the stairs, wrapped in a towel, smiling like she always did, I felt a wave of nausea. Something inside me shifted that night. I couldn't shake the feeling that my wife, the woman I loved, was hiding something from me. And whatever it was about to destroy us. I couldn't let it go. After that night, everything started to fall into place, and it was like I was finally seeing things clearly for the first time. The unexplained business trips, the whispered phone calls, everything was connected, but I still didn't have the full picture. I needed proof, something concrete. The next day, while Emily was out at another business meeting, I went back to her laptop. It felt wrong, sneaky, but I was desperate. I found the account again, the one she'd been transferring money to, and this time I dug deeper. A quick online search led me to the bank's website, and with a little bit of tech knowledge I'd picked up over the years, I managed to reset the password using Emily's security questions. I logged in, and there it was, a hidden checking account, with over $100,000 sitting in it. But that wasn't the worst part. As I scrolled through the transactions, I saw the names on the withdrawals. Hotels. Restaurants. Flights to cities she had never mentioned. The same pattern, over and over, places I knew Jason had business in. My stomach turned as I realized she wasn't just hiding money. She was paying for trips, dinners, and God knows what else. And Jason. He was part of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to her, my mind racing. I couldn't confront her yet, not without knowing the full story. I needed to find a way to catch her in the act. That's when I came up with a plan. Over the next few weeks, I pretended everything was normal. I didn't want her to suspect anything, so I played the role of the oblivious husband. But behind the scenes, I was digging into her business. Emily had built a small empire, a consulting firm she co-owned with Jason. I never paid much attention to it before, she handled all the details, but now I wanted to know everything. I met with an old friend who worked in finance and asked him for advice. Without revealing too much, I had him explain how business partnerships could be sabotaged, how someone could lose everything without even realizing it until it was too late. With his help, I slowly started to make moves. I intercepted emails, quietly accessed her company's financial records, and I saw the cracks. Emily and Jason had been borrowing heavily, leveraging their business for rapid expansion. They had investors lined up, big plans to go global, but it was all built on a shaky foundation. If the wrong information got out, if an investor pulled out at the wrong time, it would all come crashing down. I knew exactly how to make that happen. The hardest part was keeping my emotions in check. Every night, Emily would come home late, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. She'd kiss me on the cheek and ask about my day, like she wasn't living a double life. Like she wasn't sharing a bed with another man while I sat here waiting for her. But I played along. I smiled and nodded, all the while knowing that I was slowly setting her up for the fall. One night, after another supposed late meeting, she slipped into bed beside me, her hair still damp from a shower. She kissed me softly and whispered, "I love you," before turning over and falling asleep. I stared at the ceiling, my chest tight. I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed her to trust me for just a little while longer. I knew it was only a matter of time before I had the proof I needed. But knowing wasn't enough, I had to see it for myself. So, I started tracking her movements. It sounds obsessive, I know, but after everything I'd discovered, I needed to be sure. I installed a GPS tracker on her car, and I checked it when she said she had meetings or was working late. It didn't take long before the pattern emerged. The addresses were always the same, a boutique hotel on the outskirts of town. I'll never forget the night I followed her there. It was a Thursday, and she had told me she'd be home late from a business dinner with a potential investor. I acted casual, like always, wished her luck, and watched her drive off in that perfectly polished black Mercedes she loved so much. My stomach was in knots as I sat in the driveway, waiting for the GPS to show she'd arrived at her destination. Around 9 p.m., the little dot on my phone screen blinked. She was at the hotel. I knew Jason would be there too. It was their spot. I had checked the hotel's records through a connection, and their names showed up together more than once. I didn't go in. I couldn't. I sat in my car, across the street from the hotel, watching the front entrance. About half an hour later, I saw them, Emily and Jason, walking out of the lobby. They didn't see me, of course. They were too caught up in each other. Emily was laughing at something he said, her hand resting on his arm as they walked to his car. She looked different with him. Softer. Like she had let her guard down in a way she never did with me anymore. I felt my blood boil, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight I thought I might break it. This was it. This was the confirmation I needed, but it didn't bring me the closure I thought it would. Instead, it made me feel hollow, like something inside me had been ripped out and thrown on the ground. I watched them drive off together, probably heading to the same room they had been sneaking off to for months, if not longer. I went home that night, and for the first time, I didn't care if Emily noticed something was wrong. I couldn't even look at her when she came back. She slipped into bed without a word, maybe sensing my distance, or maybe too wrapped up in Jason to notice. Either way, I barely slept. But that night gave me the final push I needed to put my plan into action. The next morning, I sat in my home office and drafted an anonymous letter to one of their biggest investors, highlighting irregularities in their business. I didn't need to say much. Just a few well-placed concerns about the company's financial stability, the risky moves they had been making, and a few subtle hints that Emily and Jason were involved in a personal relationship that could complicate things professionally. I sent the letter, and then I waited. It didn't take long for things to start falling apart. First, one investor pulled out, citing trust issues with the company's leadership. Then another. Before they knew it, the entire deal they had been working on was in jeopardy. Emily was frantic. I could see the stress eating at her, the late-night phone calls with Jason growing more desperate as they scrambled to keep everything afloat. But the more they struggled, the faster they sank. I had started a fire they couldn't put out. I didn't say a word. I played the supportive husband, pretending to be concerned about the business without letting on that I knew exactly what was happening. Watching her try to fix the mess was almost satisfying, but the pain still lingered. Even when they were losing everything, Emily still hadn't realized that I knew. The fallout was faster than even I had imagined. Within weeks, Emily and Jason's business was hanging by a thread. The investors they had counted on were gone, and they were scrambling to find new sources of funding. Emily started spending even more time away from home, more late nights at the office, or at least that's what she told me. But I knew exactly where she was. Jason wasn't handling the pressure well, either. I overheard a conversation one night. Emily was in the kitchen on her phone, trying to calm him down. I could hear the panic in her voice, though she was trying to keep it together. "We'll figure it out, Jason," she whispered urgently. "We just need to stay focused. We can't let anyone else find out about this." I almost laughed at the irony of it all. She was fighting so hard to save something that was already doomed. I had made sure of that. But it wasn't just the business that was crumbling. Our marriage was unraveling too, and I could feel the distance growing between us. Emily seemed distracted all the time, barely noticing me when we were in the same room. She was consumed by the disaster at work, and I knew it was only a matter of time before it bled into her personal life, too. Part of me wanted to confront her then, to throw everything in her face and watch her reaction. But I couldn't do it yet. I needed her to feel the weight of everything slipping away before I revealed that I knew the truth. One night, after she had fallen asleep beside me, I logged into her business email again. I hadn't checked in a while, and I wanted to see how bad things were getting. What I found was even worse than I'd expected. They were broke. I could see it in the emails between her and Jason, the desperate exchanges about securing loans, the panicked pleas to investors who had already turned them down. They were weeks away from losing everything, the office, their clients, even the house we lived in. Emily had been quietly taking out loans against our home to keep the business afloat, hoping they could turn things around before I noticed. She was putting everything on the line for him. For them. And yet, through all of it, she still came home to me every night, pretending like we were fine. That hurt the most. The lies. The fact that she didn't even consider telling me the truth, not about the business, not about Jason, not about anything. That's when I decided to accelerate the plan. I had been patient, but now it was time for Emily to feel the full impact of her choices. I made a few calls to the investors I knew were still on the fence, subtly feeding their doubts, pushing them just enough to make them walk away. I knew Jason was already close to breaking, and if the pressure kept building, he would crack. And when he did, Emily would have no one left to turn to. A few days later, it happened. Emily came home in the middle of the afternoon, something she never did. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, and she was shaking. I asked her what was wrong, even though I already knew. "We lost the last investor," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jason. He lost it. He said he can't do this anymore." "What do you mean, he can't do this anymore?" I asked, pretending to be confused. "He's gone," she said, her voice cracking. "He left the company. He's done. We're ruined, and he just walked away." She buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. I had never seen her like this before. She looked so small, so defeated, like the strong, confident woman I had married had vanished completely. I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. Jason was gone. He had abandoned her when things got tough, proving that their little affair was nothing more than a fling, a fantasy that couldn't survive the real world. And now, she was left with nothing. "I'm sorry, Emily," I said, wrapping my arms around her as she cried. "We'll figure something out." But in my mind, I knew there was no coming back from this. She had gambled everything, her business, her reputation, even our home, and she had lost it all. And she still didn't know that I was the one who had taken it all away from her. The days after Jason left were the hardest for Emily. She was trying to keep it together, but it was clear that she was falling apart. Her business was officially in shambles. Clients were pulling out, employees were jumping ship, and the bills were piling up faster than she could handle. She spent hours on the phone every day, pleading with banks and potential investors, but no one was willing to take a chance on her now. Not after the bad press, not after the rumors. I watched it all unfold quietly from the sidelines, playing my part as the supportive husband while she ran around trying to salvage what little was left. But I knew it was over. There was nothing left to save. She just didn't realize it yet. One evening, she came home with a stack of papers in her hand, her face pale and drawn. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping a cup of coffee when she dropped the documents in front of me without saying a word. I glanced down at them and instantly recognized what they were. Foreclosure papers. She had missed too many payments on the house. The bank had decided to take it back. "We're going to lose the house," she said, her voice hollow. I tried to stop it, but there's nothing I can do. We don't have the money." I stared at the papers for a moment, letting her words sink in. This was it. The final blow. I could feel her eyes on me, waiting for some kind of reaction, some kind of response. But all I could think about was how she had lied to me. How she had betrayed me, not just with Jason, but with everything. "We can sell some things," she continued, her voice trembling. "Maybe the car, some of the furniture. We can figure something out, right?" I looked up at her, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She was standing there, still trying to fix everything, still trying to fight for something that was long gone. But I couldn't feel sympathy, not anymore. I had watched her deceive me for too long, had seen her lie to my face while she slept with another man and risked everything we had built together. "I don't know, Emily," I said, My voice calm and measured. Maybe it's too late for that. Her eyes widened slightly, like she wasn't sure what to make of my response. There was a flicker of fear there, too, like she was finally realizing that things were out of her control. But she still didn't know the truth. She still didn't know what I had done. I stood up from the table and walked over to the counter, pretending to busy myself with the coffee pot. I didn't want to see the look on her face when she realized that everything she had worked for was slipping away. That there was no saving it. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and I could hear the guilt in her voice. "I'm so sorry." For a moment, I thought maybe she was about to come clean, to tell me the truth about Jason, about the affair, about everything. But she didn't. She just stood there, waiting for me to say something, waiting for me to offer a solution like I always had. But I stayed quiet. A few days later, the final blow arrived in the form of a letter. I found it first, an official notice from the bank, confirming the foreclosure of our home and the liquidation of her business assets. They were taking everything. There was no coming back from this. I left it on the kitchen counter for her to find, and when she did, I heard the sharp intake of breath, the way her footsteps faltered as she read the words in front of her. I didn't have to look to know what was happening. I could picture her standing there, staring at the paper, her world crumbling around her. She had lost everything, her business, her partner, her home. And the worst part was, she still didn't know why. She didn't know that it had been me all along. I stayed in the living room, listening to her sobs echo through the house, waiting for her to realize that the life she had built with Jason was over. Waiting for the moment when she would finally come to terms with the fact that she had gambled everything, and lost. But I never told her the truth. Not about the affair. Not about the money. Not about how I had slowly, meticulously destroyed everything she had worked for. And as I stood there, listening to her cry, I realized something. I didn't need her to know. I had already won. How would you react if your partner was mixing business with pleasure? Would you ruin them or try to fix the relationship?